Hello everyone, myself I'm Rani. Today I'm going to give presentation on documentation is automation. Uh, Let me introduce myself. I am Rani. I am studying at Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, BTech. Let's see the contents. Introduction, benefits of documenting process, tools for automating documentation, examples of using documentation for automation, challenges of using documentation for automation, and the conclusion. Let's see the introduction. Documentation is a crucial aspect of any project. It is the process of recording and organizing information about a system, application, or process. However, documentation is often overlooked or undervalued in software development. So, documentation is very important while you are creating a project or you are creating something the new creative things. Documentation is plays a main role because when you do that after completion of that particular task, if someone wants to understand that, or someone wants to get into it, and if someone wants to change the idea of it, change some modify for to do some modifies, he must go through the documentation of the project. So documentation is must and should, so it plays an important role. So it may be in software development. So it Our documentation is often overlooked or undervalued in software development. In this presentation, we will discuss how documentation can be used as a tool for automation. We will explore the benefits of documenting process, tools for automating documentation, and examples of how documentation can be used to automate tasks. Benefits of documenting process. Documenting process can help to improve communication and collaboration among team members. So documentation is more useful when you get into the project. For example, let's take a project. When you get into project, it is more, the detailed information will be there of the project, and it can be used. It will be very useful for understanding the project, and it can be a collaboration and communication among team members. It provides a clear understanding of how a system or application works, which can reduce errors and increase efficiency. Additionally, documenting a process can help with knowledge transfers. So, when team members leave a project, the knowledge and expertise can be lost. However, if processes are well documented, and new team members can quickly get up to speed up and continue the work without disruptions. Let's see the tools for automating documentations. So there are many tools available for automating documentation. So one example is Swagger, which renders documentation for RESTful APIs. Another tool is Phoenix, which can be used to generate documentation for Python projects. So here we are using two. We are using two documentation automations. They are, first one is Swagger, which can generate documentation for RESTful APIs. APIs in the sense application program interface. So, so when we are creating a software project, so there are many of the APIs to be shared, to be downloaded, and to be excluded in the project while you are doing or executing the project. So they are must and should. So for that we are using Swagger, and another tool is Phoenix, which can be used to generate documentation for Python projects. So as we see, Python is most used programming language. So to do any project in Python, and we want to give presentation on it, so Phoenix will be very useful. Automating documentation can save time and reduce errors. It ensures the documentation is always up to date and consistent, which can improve the quality of the project overall. So here, if you are doing any complex program, so it's must and should to have a documentation. So for that, we are using automating documentation, which can reduce errors, which can save time. It ensures that the documentation is always up to date and consistent, which can improve the quality of a project overall. So the here we are using Swagger and Sprinx, and as we also know the importance of automating documentation. Next, we have given some pictures of Snix and Swagger. So let's see this Snix. So here, this is the interface of Snix. When you get into the website of Snix, here like this you will get to, like this it will be there, and in this you can document the Python projects in Snix. And in Swagger, here it is like, here as you seen before, it gives the documentation of APIs, and this is application program interface. So it is most useful in computer, in software development, when you are creating any website or application or any app. It will be very useful in Swagger, and for Python projects it will be used Phoenix. Examples of using documentation for automation. One example of using documentation for automation is in testing. Test cases can be documented and automated, allowing for faster and more accurate testing. So now one of the most useful thing is testing. So testing your project, testing the documentation is correctly given or not according to the project. Another example is in deployment. Documentation can be used to automate the deployment process, ensuring that all necessary steps are taken consistently and efficiently. So in the documentation there will be each and every step will be written, will be there for executing any project or any application. So which will be by following that steps, which will be reduce the errors and deployment, how the deployment of the project, how the deployment of the software or application can be done, will be given in clearly. So that will be useful for the project to move forward. And challenges of using documentation for automation. Well, there are many benefits to using documentation for automation. There are also challenges. So as we see, benefits of it, which reduces the errors, which will be easy to deploy and in testing case, and it can save the time, and which can be which will be the easy to communicate between the team members about the project or any new idea. So there are also challenges for this, challenges of for automation documentation. So one challenge is keeping documentation up to date. As projects evolve, documentation must be updated accordingly. So when we do any software, the documentation is created. When we do some changes, modify over the date, over the year, over the past, so there must be like change in the documentation. If you cannot if you didn't change anything in the documentation, there will be some errors, there will be some distracting while executing the softwares, so which may result in error, and which may result in inconsistency and inefficient of documentation. And another challenge is ensuring the documentation is accessible and understandable. So another challenge is ensuring that the documentation is accessible to the team members and understandable to them. And if the documentation is not written in the proper way, the team members cannot understand. The next person who is being recruited for the position is cannot be able to understand what the documentation is, what the software is about, and how to execute that software and application, and what are the changes to be made, and what are the existence problems are there. So these things are cannot be understood by that person, and which will be result in inefficient and inconsistency, and there will be like more of disruptions uh, to handle the more of the errors, and which will be result in very inconsistency. So documentation that is too technical or difficult to navigate can be a barrier to automation. So that is too technical or difficult to navigate. So there must be a changes. If you made any change to that or that software, the application or anything, it must be changed in the documentation, and it should be give a proper clear cut details for that thing, for that application, which will be result in good documentation, and which will be result in good efficient documentation, which will be in the good. And conclusion. So documentation is a powerful tool for automation. By documenting process and using tools to automate documentation, projects can be more efficient, consistent, and error-free. As we seen, the what are the benefits of documenting and automation in documentation. So there are more efficient, consistent, and error-free. While there are challenges to using documentation for automation, the benefits for outweigh the cost. By prioritizing the documentation, teams can create better products and work more effectively together. So, as we've seen, the challenges of that also, challenges of documentation automation we have seen, and what are the some we have seen some of the examples of automation documentation. They are Swagger and Sphinx. So Swagger, Sphinx will be used for documentation of Python projects, and Swagger can be used uh, to document for the documentation of RESTful APIs for any software or for any interface. So we have gone through all of these, and here the conclusion is that the documentation of the documentation automation is will be more efficient of any of software application, that will be consistent and error free. And well, there are challenges to using documentation for automation. The benefits for outweigh the cost, and it should not be outweigh the cost. And by prioritizing the documentation, team members can create better projects and work more efficiently together. So by modifying it, the documentation also must be modified, and it should be clear cut very properly. So this is how documentation automation will be work. So these are the benefits, and we have seen these are challenges also. So this is documentation is automation. So thank you.